Welcome to the show, everyone. Moving at 1,041.66 light years per hour through the films of Harrison Ford, it's the Ford Fiesta. I'm Adam the Wit-O-Maker Wit.
And I'm Paul Press 10 from Navarone.
Today we talk about the most influential movie of all time, the star-making, industry-changing masterpiece, Star Wars. A movie so big, we needed another guest. It's been a few episodes since we had someone join us, but we definitely wanted this guy to weigh in on the biggest movie ever made, co-founder of the Good People Association and author of Why We Love Star Wars, The Great Moments That Built a Galaxy Far, Far Away, Ken Napzok. Now, as ever, a little housekeeping, a reminder that you help the show when you comment, like, or subscribe wherever you can on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, YouTube, all the places that we're putting the show out there. And, of course, check out themovieguys.net for more from us and follow @themovieguys all over social media. If you're listening to this show and you're like, man, this show is made for me, Paul and I seek to put a show that's like, absolutely for us, because we know we're not alone in our love of Harrison Ford and how much we treat this stuff. So get out there, just talk about it a little bit, and let people know about this great show. Now, do you need a recap of Star Wars? Of course not, but we're going to give you one anyway. That's coming up. But first, what's new in the world of Harrison Ford? Paul?
Well, it's been a minute, but we all saw Harrison Ford recently at the Oscars, presenting the Oscar for Best Editing. And, notes from the same studio executives who thought it was very important to put pants on a Wookiee. And he did a whole comedy bit about the notes from Blade Runner, which I thought was fun, that the executives gave him dopey notes, and now, of course, they've messed around with Blade Runner 3 or 4 times to where I actually think the final cut, I think was the name of the latest one, is my favorite. I think I like that one, the final cut.
But isn't it fascinating, an era where you can have all these various cuts? Didn't Coppola just do a re-edit of The Cotton Club? Like, all right, why not?
Did Godfather 3 for sure. What was it called? The Death of Michael Corleone is now what it's subtitled. Apparently it's better, but am I going to find out? Probably not.
I never thought Godfather 3 was that bad. It had a bad reputation. I took that into the screening of it, but I've realized the whole time, I'm like, well, I'm letting other people whisper in my ear instead of just watching this movie.
Oh, here's some really interesting Harrison Ford news. Okay, Harrison Ford partnered with Wyoming Whiskey as a creative director for a launch of 4 new labels of Wyoming whiskey. It's a big brand of whiskey out there, and they're called the National Parks Limited Edition American Whiskey and Wide Open Spaces. These 4 labels, Wide Open Spaces by Air. So what happened was, there's a guy named Tuck, I think his name is like Tuck Fauntleroy. He's a photographer.
Okay.
He went up over the national parks up by where Harrison Ford lives, because he lives in Jackson.
Because Harrison Ford
Wyoming.
Owns half of Wyoming, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he owns like half of Wyoming.
So they took shots of the Grand Tetons, shots of the Yellowstone Lake, one of the Snake River, I believe, and some other places. And these were going to be photos that were on the label of this special 4 bottles of Wyoming whiskey, and Ford picked the photos specifically that were going to be on the label because 10% of the profits of the entire sale of all these goes to the national parks, and he's big into environmentalism, as you know, and I have been to 8 national parks in the last year, so I was fired up to find out all about this. I know my girlfriend loves whiskey. She and I love the national parks, plus Harrison Ford. I bought a bottle. And it's great. And it's, I guess because she told me it's great. I don't drink, but she loved it. She thought it was fantastic. And it looks great on the shelf. It's got this picture of the Grand Tetons on the front.
Wow.
So she thought it was fantastic. But the 4 specific bottles came in these like ridiculously ornate wooden casks. And he went online to auction them off with the people behind the whiskey and the photographer. And I can't imagine what they went for. Like this one, it said Harrison Ford edition or whatever on the bottle. Like it was a whole big thing he got involved in recently. So he's in the news,
Wow, that's really cool. And it's very Harrison Ford. I mean, again, he owns half of Wyoming. He's a big environmentalist, and he loves him some national parks.
Yeah, and so do we. So that was a cool purchase. And the national parks the general national parks line, not one of the 4 bottles that there's only one each of.
Yeah.
Which you no way you're affording. I can imagine. But the national parks line is out there, so go check it out. Wyoming whiskey. And, of course, we have a lot going on with Indiana Jones 5. More cast members were announced. I think last time we talked about Mads Mikkelsen and Thomas Kretschmann. Now Boyd Holbrook, who was one of your villains in Logan, is on board. And Shawnette Renee Wilson, one of the Dora Milaje from the Marvel films, is on board. And don't know how, don't know what they're doing, but they're in. And so am I, as you can imagine.
Wow. The first Disney-produced Indiana Jones 5 has a ton of Marvel actors in it, right?
Yeah, which is cool. Yeah, Kretschmann from the Captain America. Yeah. Mads from Doctor Strange. They're all, it's a ton of them.
They've always rumored an Indiana Jones 5, but they didn't physically start production until you and I started the Ford Fiesta podcast.
That's right.
I'm saying we're putting this out there.
We're doing it. The rumor about plot, of course, involved the space race. Who knows what? But there are photos from the set. Well, then the photo of the set of him on set, in the outfit, is out there. And I'm like, I don't want too many spoilers, but I think I had to see just that. And our reaction, of course, was what you always react to when you see Christopher Reeve in the Superman outfit, who's just standing there. And you say,
how is he doing that? How is that possible?
How does he do that?
How does he do
What's
that?
he doing? Nothing. Yeah, but
nothing.
How does he do it? And Harrison Ford in that iconic costume, same thing. I don't even know how he does it, but he's
so magical. So magical to see him in that costume again. My God, that costume is just carved out of movie marble.
Yeah. And all the biking we've been talking about in this show, he biked from Tijuana to Cabo. He's got himself in a great shape. It's gonna be awesome. James Mangold, forget about it. Just
like J.J. Abrams, you've got a legitimate fan of the series who just wants to honor all that has come before with this by presenting what he loved about the originals. That's J.J. in Star Wars too. It's going to be special.
It's going to be a hell of a year plus, which sucks, but it'll be a hell of a year while we wait.
What if this Ford Fiesta ends on Indiana Jones 5? It just times out perfectly.
We could start getting lazy, and make sure it does. And then, of course, you Google Harrison Ford news, and that's where the weird stuff comes up. Before he started shooting, he was spotted by the Daily Mail biking in Manhattan Beach. I told you he was biking. So I bike all over hell. Since I started dating Susan, she's a big biker. We bike, and, I just did Griffith Park here a little while ago, biked all over the place. I don't run into Harrison Ford.
Why have you not run into Harrison Ford?
Well, I don't know. According to Daily Mail, he's all over the place. I can't run. I don't know. You'd think you would at this
keep
point.
Biking. Keep biking.
Anyway, one more quick recurring show segment before we get to our breakdown of Star Wars. This date in Ford history. Now, May 13th, 1970, Getting Straight is released. May 14th, Willard Ford is born, and his dad is Han Solo. There's a life. But this was in 70 and 69. But let's get more recent. June 12th, 1981, Raiders of the Lost Ark is released. The 40th anniversary is this year, so look for it in theaters. The great thing about living in Los Angeles is I see Raiders of the Lost Ark on a big screen every year. And that's why I will not move. Even last year, pandemic, went to the drive-in, saw it. So do not miss it on the big screen.
You did not miss an actual screening of Raiders of the Lost Ark in last year of all years. But Paul, that's everything I need to know about you.
Exactly. And everyone who doesn't know me, know that coming in. But now, 40th anniversary, I don't know if it's going to get some major re-release, but it's already on the app for AMC Theaters. There's no screenings assigned to it, but the poster's there and you can click on it. And so one of these days, the theaters will show up and the show times will show up, and then check it out.
What if this coincides with our episode on Raiders of the Lost Ark? And we actually go, instead of just streaming as we have for all these other movies, we actually go see.
We'd have to haul ass. We're still about 7 or 8 movies away.
Yeah, it's true.
But, also there are release dates to movies that are having their anniversary all over the place, scattered all over. Since we did the last show, stuff like Patriot Games came out in 92, and Empire Strikes Back came out, and then even just recently, June 12th, 1981, not as big as June 12th, 1981 was Raiders. A later June 12th saw 6 Days, 7 Nights. June 10th in 2003 saw Hollywood Homicide.
Ford's all about the summer.
I love that era when the summer came out and you just knew all your favorites were going to be in something. Oh, what's this summer's Mel Gibson movie? What's this summer's Arnold, Tom Cruise, Julia Roberts? Sandra Bullock, and then Harrison Ford. Like what was their movie going to be that summer?
We could call that the Premiere Magazine era of film.
Totally.
Basically, right?
Totally. And then they'd be on the cover of the magazine, you know?
Absolutely.
But I like the Star days. And what were they doing? Is it going to be a comedy? Is it going to be action? Is it going to be both? Is it some sci-fi? I mean, a drama? You never know what you're going to get from the big star in their summer movie.
Yeah, what's this year's big Tom Cruise movie? Not like, what's the new thing that also stars Tom Cruise? You know?
Yeah,
what's
exactly.
the new Mummy? What's the launch of the new universe that also stars Tom Cruise?
But strangely, what a lot of people were tweeting about this week were posting photos of Harrison Ford's broken leg from June 11th, 2014, when he broke his ankle on the set of The Force Awakens.
All you CGI complainers. Oh, you hate CGI so much. You're not going to be happy until you break Harrison Ford's leg, are you? With a physical door. Wasn't CGI. Was everybody happy that day?
Did a crew member push the door onto his leg? Because, I went to a taping of Frasier. His elevator doors aren't mechanical. There's a couple of guys just opening and shutting them.
Right.
So did somebody go and just like push the door on Harrison Ford's leg?
Well, it must have been, my assumption was always, and I've never seen the door or what one it was or what scene that was. I never even thought about that. It's too horrific to think about, frankly.
I don't want to think about Harrison Ford getting hurt.
No. I mean, it scares the hell out of me that he crashed an airplane into a golf course and we almost lost him that day.
Hardly. He walked out like, oh, where like someone call the cops, whatever. He didn't.
He walked out and went 4. He had some cool line, but I guess it was pretty heavy because J.J. Abrams tried to lift it off of him and couldn't and hurt his back. So it must have been a really heavy door. Boy, they really didn't want to go CGI. See what happens? You see what happens, Lebowski?
See what happens, kids.
Yeah.
See what happens with your analog film production.
Unlike the last few movies we've discussed, or half a dozen or so, we don't really need to say, now, I know you're asking, what the hell is Star Wars? So instead, we'll just go to our patented Movie Guys recap.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a kid on a desert planet blows up the Death Star. All right. Oh, okay, there's a lot more that happens in between there. Adam?
Yeah. For example, the movie begins with A New Hope.
A New Hope? Isn't this the first movie? How can we bring in something new to a galaxy we're unfamiliar with? Everything's new in this galaxy.
We've got 5 Star Wars movies to cover on this show. What you should be focusing on is the evil galactic empire and their space station capable of destroying an entire planet.
What I like to call a Death Star.
Princess Leia Organa has the schematics and can use them to destroy the Death Star, but her ship is intercepted by an Imperial Star Destroyer and the evil Darth Vader.
Leia takes Leia prisoner, but not before she hides the Death Star plans in R2-D2 and sends the droid and his droid companion C-3PO together to Tatooine.
Is it Leia or Leia? They say Leia, don't they, in the movie? I hear
they do say Leia. It's regional. I've heard George Lucas didn't correct anybody's pronunciations on set because he said it was regional. It's true.
Wow, okay. It's regional to parts of the galaxy. I guess that makes sense. The droids are captured by Jawas and end up in the care of a grumpy Republican moisture farmer and his nephew Luke Skywalker.
I'm with you too.
While cleaning the droids, Luke finds a holographic message of Leia, or Leia, requesting the help of Obi-Wan Kenobi, who he sets off to find.
Luke is attacked by Tusken Raiders! But is saved by Ben Kenobi, who reveals himself to be Obi-Wan, from whom Luke is introduced to the Force.
It's an energy field created by all living things.
Sensing that they have a growing relationship evolving here, Obi-Wan then decides it would be a pretty good idea to lie to Luke about his father being killed by Darth Vader.
You want it sugar-coated or right between the eyes?
But since having the power to communicate with all living things would be worthless if all living things were destroyed by the Empire, the duo get back to the task at hand, delivering the plans to Princess Leia on her home planet of Alderaan. Road trip!
Since Luke's car is a Pinto incapable of hyperspace travel, Obi-Wan and Luke look for a galactic Uber driver at a wretched hive of scum and villainy. But since Uber Corporate is on Earth, they go to Mos Eisley Spaceport instead.
Obi-Wan shows Luke that the Force is useful for more than opening up a story's mythology at the end of the first act. It can get you past the bouncer at the club.
I believe it was Anton Chekhov who said, if in Act 1 you give the Chosen One a lightsaber, in the second act you're going to have to cut an arm off with it.
And I believe it was Pavel Chekhov who said, he put things in our ears. After Obi-Wan drops the amount of arms in the bar to an odd number, or considering this bar, maybe an even number, they get on to the task at hand, introducing the main character.
Y'all ready for this?
He's as commanding as a bellhop.
Paging Mr. Ellis.
As rogue as a hippie.
Quicker on the draw than a firing squad.
Fire! Damn it, fire!
With the swagger of a cowboy.
He's gonna be mean when he wakes up, Buck.
And the charm of a scoundrel.
The tenacity of a brusque aide.
Nice Christmas cookie, sir. I made you want one?
Give it up for the best of Harrison Ford, completing this journey from obscurity to take the stage as
Han Solo. I'm captain of the Millennium Falcon.
Harrison Ford moves up to lead actor for the first time in this podcast and immediately becomes the biggest movie star of all time, playing one of the most famous characters in cinema history in the biggest movie ever made in one single performance.
also Chewbacca. What's a Chewbacca? A Wookiee? What's a Wookiee? Welcome to Star Wars.
After significantly shorter negotiations than The Phantom Menace, Obi-Wan and Han agree on a price. But before Han can take off, his past catches up to him when a bounty hunter working for Jabba the Hutt moves in for the kill. What's a Jabba the Hutt? We'll explain when you're older.
Accounts vary as to who shot first, but this is the Ford Fiesta, so Han shot Hold on. I'm being handed something from the Special Edition Legal Counsel McCallum and Associates. To avoid interfering with an ongoing case, we ask that media reporting on the case not definitively state the order of shooting in the Cantina incident. Well, somebody got shot, and it wasn't Han Solo.
Obi-Wan, Luke, and the robots narrowly escape Mos Eisley aboard the Millennium Falcon while being attacked by a patrol of stormtroopers. Having to return gunfire to get me safely into a rideshare, that'll dock him a star.
When Grand Moff Tarkin's methods of persuading Princess Leia to give up the location of the rebel base by drugging her and asking nicely falter, he pulls a page out of How to Win Friends and Crush Your Enemies and blows up her home planet.
Arriving at the ruins of Alderaan, the Millennium Falcon doesn't have time to ponder whether it's always looked like that or has let itself go, because they are sucked into the Death Star quicker than you in a conversation about crypto at a work urinal. The gang decides to tick a few things off their to-do list: disable the tractor beam, rescue the princess, and get R2-D2 to a planet that's not blown up. But first, to make sure one of them dies, they split up.
Team Jailbreak puts together a plan to secretly and quietly break Princess Leia out of prison by letting a rampaging monster loose and shooting as many people and things as possible. Maybe they're not good at this.
Meanwhile, Obi-Wan sneaks past hundreds of troops and shuts down the tractor beam, and also the Death Star Muzak on general principle. The only way he could get caught is if there was another Jedi also connected to all living things, but particularly the living thing that cut off his arms and legs and left him on fire in lava. Damn it!
As if there weren't enough cliffs to hang from, Han, Luke, and the princess escape the Death Star by being crushed in a box full of monsters and swinging over a bridge that's out.
That's when the title match gets underway. Kenobi vs. Vader 2, Rumble in Bay 327. Obi-Wan is no match for the younger Jedi and his performance-enhancing robot body. Darth Vader strikes him down, making him more powerful than Darth could possibly imagine, but not after first making him less alive than was easily imagined.
At which point Star Wars, worried that it's boring you, picks up the pace by throwing our heroes into a space battle unlike anything the audience who hadn't seen the last 20 minutes of this movie had ever seen. Luke Skywalker and Han Solo take down the pursuing TIE fighters with the type of skill that would make a lesser man cocky, and make their way to Yavin 4, a planet with, presumably, 3 prequels.
Finally, Princess Leia gets R2-D2 to the rebels. Remember that? It's a movie about that. An analysis of the plans reveals a weakness in the battle station, the tailpipe. And the rebels hatch a plan to put a banana in that tailpipe. Basically, send a bunch of AMC Pintos to take down the Chrysler Building.
Feel like you haven't seen enough war in a movie with war in the title? The pilots of the Red Squadron remedy that with a dazzling display of World War II dogfights. But with spaceships. Unless you saw the rough cut before the special effects were finished, in which case, you saw World War II dogfights.
In a dazzling 20-minute sequence full of special effects, sound effects, and cinematic montage, half of which would be more excitement than any other movie audiences in 1977 had ever seen, short of the first hour and 45 minutes of Star Wars.
One after another, the X-Wings take their shot, like flies trying to defeat a bug lamp. All rebels are killed or taken out except for Luke Skywalker, who zeroes in on the exhaust port with former pod racer Darth Vader zeroing in on him. It seems the mission has failed until
Obi-Wan tells him to use the Force.
We're going to save that for the Alec Guinness Jubilee. This podcast is about Harrison Ford. Han Solo swoops in to save the day, shooting the remaining TIE fighters and sending Darth Vader spinning off into space.
I want the movie to end with a big explosion.
That was a good description of Star Wars.
Twist our arms to talk about the greatest movie of all time. In fact, I ask everybody on the old podcast we used to do, and I continue to do this when I interview people, what's your favorite movie of all time? And it has to be noted that when you ask someone that question, besides Star Wars is inferred, right? Like, it's just, what's your favorite movie of all time? Like, what's your favorite music group besides the Beatles? But we're going to speak a lot here as we bring in our guest as we talk about the film, run down some of the aspects that make Star Wars great. So joining us, as promised or threatened, is the author of Why We Love Star Wars, The Great Moments That Built a Galaxy Far, Far Away, now available everywhere you get books. And where is that, you might say? Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. He's a movie talk force to be reckoned with, no pun intended. He's all over the web, including the Good People Association, which he co-founded. Ken Napzok is with us.
Ken Napzok!
Hey, boys! I feel so just lame because I'm a giant Star Wars fan and a giant Beatle fan, and those are usually the answers. But you're right, Paul. You have to almost put them on a shelf, and then you answer When Harry Met Sally.
It's like Anthony Hopkins winning the Oscar. Say what you want about how they set it up for a different outcome, but the guy... It's like boring to say he's brilliant at this point. It's like saying Streep, you can't deny how great he is in The Father. You can't deny the greatness of Star Wars. I'm glad you're here to talk about it with us.
I'm so happy to be here. And as a Han Solo guy and a Harrison Ford fan and a fan of just grumpiness in general, I'm happy to be here for that.
But let's talk about the Good People Association. Give us a quick plug on that, Ken, so people can check out what you're doing, because it's a noble and necessary thing in these times.
It's a whole network. It's a whole thing. You have a set and everything.
Yeah, we have a set. We have 3 sets, actually, in one, and it is a digital brand production company / Empire Fun, started by me, Mark Riley, Josh McCouga, and Eric Bass of the band Shinedown. We do a lot of focus on charity work and making people laugh and entertaining people, but also finding the positive stories and finding the good. We do it all. And then also we play, a board game we're trying to create. So it's just kind of silly. We're over there at the GPA.fun, which is a real website. Did not know you could do that until we did that, but .fun is real, and that's what we got going on.
And I have to put a plug out there for the show Internet for Old People, because I've already been on it. Great premise for a show. Dig up old pieces of pop culture and ephemera and throw them across the panel, and it's it's perfect entertainment. That was a lot of fun. It's there. Yeah, it's not a show that's just about let's make jokes about MySpace. It's that as well. But yeah, I think this is our shared languages. And Star Wars: A New Hope is one of the things that that era kind of began, that where we grew up with that as little kids, and we didn't leave it because it meant everything to us, and we shouldn't leave it because it's valuable lessons and fables of our time. And so that's what I love discussing there, and can't wait to discuss here. It's almost like 2 weeks ago we discussed American Graffiti, and that immediate nostalgia didn't really have a home yet. There were all these people that were like, oh, I remember that, but nobody had quite exploited that. And it's amazing that Lucas did that for his generation, but then gave us something. Well, look, and my pal Joseph Scrimshaw over on the Force Center podcast feed, where I hold down Star Wars Conversations there, Joseph pointed out, he goes, nostalgia is baked into Star Wars. It is George being nostalgic for the serials that he grew up on. So it's definitely in the DNA of Star Wars.
Yeah, that was the thing he originally said, was he wanted to make a Flash Gordon serial. In fact, looked for the rights. They were tied up, I believe, in Dino De Laurentiis. Even with Coppola's help after winning those Oscars, they couldn't snatch the rights away from him. So he said, screw it, I'm going to make my own thing. And then he worked really hard on a script for many, many years.
He did all right, that kid. That Georgie.
Yeah, we can keep him, I guess. So the year of let's just get down to some brass tacks on the facts here. The year of release
was 1977.
May 25th specifically is the release date. Mm-hmm. The budget, $11 million. Didn't start there, but eventually crept up to $11 million, with a box office of $775.8 million and growing. So what did we talk about with American Graffiti? It was like 777,000, made 124 million.
Like 12,000% on their investment or something.
Yeah, Lucas touches it this time in this era, and it just turns to gold. In fact, no movie had previously crossed the 500 million threshold, and in its initial release, Star Wars got up to 550. The combined box office of the films of the franchise, which this launched, of course, is over 10 billion. It's the second highest grossing franchise to Marvel, because Marvel has twice as many movies, I suppose. So it has twice as much box office, topping $22 billion.
Godfather made more money than anybody had ever seen in 1972, and this is the beginning of the film brats. And then just 3 years later, Jaws, another film brat, made more money than anybody had ever seen. And then here comes George Lucas. Already had made the most profitable movie of all. That's what people don't realize. Before Star Wars, he'd already made the most profitable movie of all time in American Graffiti.
What a wonderful, crazy time. Just a bunch of crazy guys making films to top each other. You know?
Oh, his casting session is with Brian De Palma. You know, it's like, oh, you're casting Carrie? Let me cast Star Wars alongside that. Like all these guys working alongside each other.
Yeah, the phrase I coined during our American Graffiti show was genius incest, and I stand by it now. I like it. There was just genius incest going on then, as they all shared and commingled with each other's genius. Milius and Coppola and De Palma and Spielberg and Lucas. It was just crazy. And I remember when I saw this, but I'd like to defer to our guest first. Ken, what was your first experience with
Take us
Star
back.
Wars? Because I saw it in the theater. We'll get to me in a second. Because... don't tell the Schmodown, but I'm probably older than Roca. But let John Roca continue to be the old man there.
Yeah.
And I'll try to fly under the radar. But Ken, how about your first Star Wars experience?
Paul, first of all, you're doing great, man. You got beautiful skin, brother. You got beautiful skin. Yeah,
I'm still grappling with calling it A New Hope. I'm so entrenched in my first time in the theater, having seen the movie. But anyway.
Yeah, I was a swaddled 1-year-old when my parents went to the drive-through. Well, they probably went to a drive-through as well, but drive-in to see it. And so obviously I have no memory of that. And but I missed Empire. I thought Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, and Buck Rogers were all the same, and even a little Hardware Wars. I didn't know what was what. I saw it all, but I didn't see it. But it wasn't until I was 7, so I was 7 in '83 when I saw Return of the Jedi. That's my first experience with Star Wars. But then going back to A New Hope or Episode 4, whatever you want to call it, we can call it Star Wars. My first real experience was a TV copy. My dad taped it on whatever was broadcast on back then, and so I remember the commercial breaks. I remember just the pan and scan. All that's how I was exposed to A New Hope.
Yeah, that's how I experienced Alien, and it remains one of the scariest movies of all time. And it did that to me through the fixture of a TV with commercial. I mean, there were commercials. I was still like, I can't even with this movie. And I was way too young probably to have seen that even on television. But Adam and I always talk about the HBO movies. Star Wars never got locked into that group, but when you were young, what was on HBO all the time when you were a kid? It's a shame Star Wars was always withheld from that, or I would have seen it even more thousands of times.
I remember it was such a big deal that when Showtime, I think, got the first rights to it, and they could only show it 3 times that month, and they had these big dates on the poster. It was like, we can only show it 3 times. That's how much it was locked up.
Yeah, my dad took me, and I'm sure I'd seen movies before Star Wars, but I don't remember. But I remember sitting down going, we're going to go see this adventure movie. It seems fun. And it was odd to think that because I know he was into spy novels and Westerns. So like he wanted to go see a space movie. I'm like, oh, I want to see a space movie too. And I specifically remember the cavernous Oneonta Theater in Oneonta, New York, my hometown. And just the opening shot of the Imperial Star Destroyer going over my head. I'm like, what? And then Han Solo comes at you and you're like, forget it. I'm totally all in on this for the rest of my life.
I didn't know you were up there. Didn't the Yankees have a minor league affiliate there?
They did for many moons, the Oneonta Yankees. And then they became the Oneonta Tigers. And then because the Oneonta Yankees moved to Staten Island.
Side note there, that's great. But yeah, I love that you guys experienced that, Paul. They actually have just a vibrant memory of just seeing that Star Destroyer fly over.
And seeing Mattingly play in person. But those two things.
My parents separated, so I had every Sunday with my dad. My dad saw this theater in the theaters 6 times, maybe 8 with re-releases, because they would re-release it every year before Empire. But the interesting thing about Star Wars was one of the few movies that did let you take it home. Because other movies, you went to go see it, and that was it. But Star Wars, with the action figures and the books, and I had the 33 1/3 album, The Story of Star Wars, which was all dialogue from the movie. Like I have Star Wars memorized to this day because I would just listen to that over and over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. And 33 and Third is also a great George Harrison album, right? I believe there as well. Yeah, as we're talking, I know this is audio, but I'm holding my little Harrison Ford Han Solo Lego minifig. Yeah, that's it, and that's the power of toys, but it's definitely the power of Star Wars toys. It is. You took that world home with you, and you held it in your hand with your Kenner action figures or your Luke Skywalker mask you got from a cereal box, and that was me too. It doesn't matter the era, 77, 80, 83. That's what it was, and you got to expand the story, which just meant you were expanding your love of this world and this franchise, and I definitely was a prime example of that. And let's be honest, still am.
Well, yeah, you say take it home with you. I also take it to Chicago with me, and clearly take it to L.A. with me, because my garage right now, if you saw the free-for-all we did with Star Wars figures last year, those are my Star Wars figures, and I've got two of the big Darth Vader cases. I got the full-size Millennium Falcon and Tauntaun, a Land Speeder, and more in a box labeled "Don't lay anything on top of this" in the garage.
My mom just posted on Facebook a photo of us camping in like 1982, 81, and I'm there at the campground with all my Star Wars action figures playing. That was my camping. I'm like, those went with me everywhere. That collector's case. Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. I grew up in Pismo Beach, California, so we'd head down to the sand dunes that you could go play in, and I bring my figures, and I had Tatooine in front of me. Oh, my God. It was just
but you were robbed of playing Hoth, because in Ohio, we got to play Hoth when it came to the winter. That was the best. You bring all your toys out there in the snow, and boom.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing some research for this. I was unaware they shot some of the film in Death Valley, and now they shot Mandalorian there, so it's worth a trek out there to take a look at some of the locations where they filmed these two different Star Wars properties.
I want to do that. The what is it? The 3PO and R2 approach to Jabba's palace, I believe, is out there. And I've never been out here in LA 23 years now. It's not too far to do it. I want to do it. I wonder if I get oddly emotional, like surprisingly emotional. Like if I actually was there, I'm gonna make a point of trying that.
I think I would. I always imagine if I ever made a vacation to Tunisia to see the Skywalker house, which none of us have ever done, but I think we've all wanted to. I couldn't imagine standing there. That the joy I would feel.
But yeah, you do have to go to Tunisia, and that's where that becomes problematic.
Death Valley, a little closer.
So let's go back to when Lucas started writing this story. They always talk about how he wanted to or reflect the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell, and eventually came up with a sci-fi dense Journal of the Wills.
I just love the time it took, the failed attempts, and how big it got, but also how a lot of his ideas, particularly ideas from the prequels, were in that story, on that white or yellow legal pad of paper that he wrote. I always give the example of he had the character Mace Windu, obviously changed to Windu, but it's Naboo and a lot of things like that. Like this was in his head. That's the thing I love when I look back at George and the writing process. It was so big and it was unwieldy, but the ideas were there, the world was there.
Yeah, and even with American Graffiti behind him and all the Oscar nominations and box office it achieved, United Artists wouldn't get behind Star Wars. Disney would not get behind Star Wars, and Universal would not get behind Star Wars. Eventually, Alan Ladd had faith in him, and 20th Century Fox kind of got behind him. This is like 3 movies in a row in the Ford Fiesta where we're talking about how no one believed in him. They did it anyway, and they're the biggest thing you ever saw.
Yeah, I know we're audio, but behind me is the Star Wars New Hope poster that is signed by Alan Ladd Jr., who without Alan Ladd, without Laddie, we don't get what we have right now. We don't get to talk about it. I think Laddie was one who was like, I don't know about this crazy space picture. I just knew about George, and that's all I invested in was him. So I love it. I love that story.
And he was fully prepared for Star Wars to be a failure, because he was told constantly that this was going to fail by everybody he knew. And nobody on set could possibly have what Lucas had in his mind, when they're hearing the Welsh voice of Darth Vader and going, oh, this is going to be the worst movie of all time. They're not imagining all the technology he wants to put into it in terms of sound mixing and special effects and all that. Nobody could see it but Lucas.
Just, everything. And a giant talking dog. I mean, what's going on here?
What's going on here, indeed?
Well, I guess Chewbacca is based on Lucas's dog, who would co-pilot when he would drive his car. He'd be sitting there and he thought that'd be a fun idea. And of course, just because, this whole thing is mythic now, the dog's name, Indiana.
Indiana.
Yeah.
And he told everybody, they said, what species, what kind of dog is that? And he said Wookiee. If you look at any of the old behind the scenes photo of the original Lucasfilm ranch and everything, and all the people sitting around watching footage or whatever, that big dog is in all those photos. Right. He was a mainstay.
And so you have a working title at one point that outdoes any other Star Wars title, and they get long in the future. The Adventures of Luke Starkiller as taken from the Journal of the Whills, Saga 1, The Star Wars.
I love it.
And I know you want to talk, Adam, about Ralph McQuarrie's sketches, because, I mean, they're legendary at this point.
And once again, something that's just there to create, to give the studio an idea of what they're trying to make, ultimately becomes its own coffee table books. Now all the way up to The Mandalorian, that's how they do the credits. That's baked in now. Like, that concept art thing became... Once again, all these things that had never been anything to any other movies, Star Wars puts them front and center.
Had that been done before? Of course. But because of Star Wars, we all got to know that. Yeah. I always say, like, you know the names Joe Johnston, Phil Tippett, Dennis Muren is I'm thinking of. You know those names because of their work on Star Wars. And that before that, you can't find an example of that. And Ralph McQuarrie is in that, where, just everyone knows. I used to collect trading cards with McQuarrie art on them from Star Wars.
Let's go to those names, because Industrial Light and Magic is created in 1975. Fox's visual effects department has been relatively disabled, so Lucas had to put a team together to do this himself, which is the theme of the last 3 episodes of the show. John Dykstra and his team pretty much working out of a warehouse in Van Nuys doing the digital motion control photography. They blew half their budget on 4 shots Lucas didn't care for, and then hustled to do a year's work in 6 months.
Yeah, and that warehouse, speaking of locations, I used to play golf around the corner from it and didn't really realize it my entire time. And then one day I was like,
what a legendary.
They always talk about, if you watch Empire of Dreams, the doc there, Dykstra and those guys are on there, and they're like, oh, we were like Lauren Peterson, all that, and those names. They're like, yeah, we were in a warehouse by the Van Nuys Airport. One day I just looked it up and researched it. And yeah, it was literally around the corner from the Van Nuys golf course. If you ever want to go, taking 9 holes in history.
We've all watched The Empire of Dreams and all this stuff. That shot of the one of the ships crashing into the Death Star, they had that whole thing on its side. They had a camera in the back of a truck, and they're driving along that set, and they set off the explosion. That place where they did that is so legendary to me. Like that outdoor patio where they did that. I would just sit and stare at that piece of cement and go, "Oh my God!"
You know what we should do, Adam? Adam, you, me, and Paul should just one day when I'm close to being vaxxed. I don't know where you guys are. We'll just grab a sandwich, get in a car, and go to Van Nuys.
Oh, I'm down. I'm down. So much closer than Death Valley.
I never thought I would want to be excited about what you just said, but. So March 22nd, 1976, principal photography begins, as do malfunctioning props, electronic breakdowns, a Tunisian rainstorm, etc. They have a rough go of it, as all independent films do.
For whom the gods wish to honor, first they test, as John Milius used to say.
That is so the way he would put that.
No, Milius would say that with like a cigar and like a rifle in his hand.
Yeah. The gods wish to honor, first they test.
Yeah.
All 9 sound stages at Elstree Studios were used to accommodate the film, plus a second sound stage at Shepperton to house the massive Rebel hangar. So they're getting it done. It's a big-ass production. And eventually, Mark Hamill gets in a car crash, talking about things that are messy on set, and messes up his face, which allows them to not be able to do any reshoots. So you got like one and done with everything in Star Wars.
Well, that changes my perception of that, because I thought, oh, Mark Hamill did Star Wars, and he's like, hey, man, I'm going to get me a big fancy car that I can't handle and accidentally drive it off the highway, like as a result of the money and fame or whatever. But I didn't realize, like, nobody even knew who he was yet. Just driving his old car, just something happened.
And then we get into post-production. Jim Jimpson, who I really never heard of, was the original editor.
Yeah.
Fired halfway through. And then Paul Hirsch and Richard Chew, who we know of, were brought in to join Marsha Lucas. Jimpson's cut included the look at Luke's everyday life at Anchorhead hanging out with Biggs. And so Ladd said, it kind of looks like American Graffiti in space. cut. It got shot. So guys hanging out. It's like, no, we've had too much guys hanging out like you did in American Graffiti. So they cut to instead like 20 minutes of droids blooping and bleeping.
Which was a radical way to tell the story. I mean, everything is, it's so accepted now that this is the most famous movie of all time, the most celebrated movie of all time. Everything in it is radical. We have two droids for the first half hour of this movie. Are you insane? I'm speaking now as the studios in 1976. George, this is insane. Nobody's ever, we need people. And he even cut out Luke hanging out with his friends. Just radical stuff all through this movie.
Yeah, I guess the Jabba scene was cut because of bad camera work.
Yeah, that old that Scottish guy doing the hiding my boy.
Hiding my boy.
So an early screening, it gets shown to the Genius Incest crew, De Palma, Milius, and Spielberg, and Lucas did not like their response, I guess, except for Spielberg, who saw promise in it. But of course, to his credit, it didn't have finished effects, and when they needed to do the trench run, they just kind of cut to World War II dogfight footage of planes. Not going to get the effect across that you want, I'm sure. He's
taking all the trappings of the genre of a war movie, including dogfights, and going, what if we did that in space? Sword fights, what if we did that with lasers? You know, gunfights, all that stuff. He's taking all the things that have to do with war and war pictures and putting them in there.
While also analyzing what it maybe means to, why we shouldn't fight wars. It's wonderful. But I think it also, it connects in a way, especially in 77. I don't know. Gramps Preston over here can tell us there, but you're in the theater. It's in another world, but you're connecting to that. That's why I still feel the most important shot. It might be Luke and the Twin Sons, because it's such a real human moment. And the music swells, and it's not disco, it's not this, it's this classic orchestra style. And
it's a kid looking at the sunset. We've seen this shot 100 times. There's just two suns. And it's just a great little alt to a classic a shot like that. It just happens to be two suns.
Just two.
So you collected a number of great moments from Star Wars for your book, Ken. You just mentioned one right there. What else stands out to you as your favorite moments from Star Wars?
From A New Hope, or just general?
No, I go again. I can't.
I
have no problem with it. I just, it's embedded in me. It's Star Wars.
It's embedded. We still call it Star Wars.
The trench run stuff and just the drama. Han Solo returning and coming back to save the day. The tension of the trash compactor scene. But which is also mixed with comedy, which is a bit of a staple for Star Wars, and I think that sometimes gets forgotten. It is silly, it is whiz bang, it is Saturday morning cereal. So you're going to have our heroes about to die, and a golden robot's thinking that he killed them all in the trash compactor.
Yeah, cliffhangers. It's lots of cliffhangers. Like every 20 minutes is something. You could feel that much more in some of the newer, like the Mandalorian. And now here's the cliffhanger. How's he going to get out of this? And then gets out of it onto the next thing.
Serial adventure. That's you don't want to change the DNA, and it's not. George didn't create all this stuff, and he'll never tell you. He just says, "No, I just took all these things and just wanted to pay homage to it, but tell a story with these tools." And that's one of the big ones about Star Wars: adventure, problem, escape, adventure, problem, escape.
And what I've said a number of times in different movie guys' adventures about Star Wars, it's a 70s movie. It's a product of the 70s movies that, there's always the argument to be made that after Star Wars, filmmakers didn't want to make the great American movie anymore. They wanted to make the great American hit, the great American blockbuster. But I think that taking that the best parts of 70s movies into sci-fi that Lucas did makes this my favorite one.
Yeah, and the haircuts and all the people on the Death Star definitely keep you in the 70s. They got the sideburns, you know.
That old Biggs mustache.
Well, I think Peter Jackson referred to it, but maybe not first, as a used future look. Where the future wasn't sparkly and clean and shiny. It was lived in, and that was perhaps not seen as frequently as when Lucas presented it.
Yeah, you can feel and see the dirt on the stormtroopers and the faces of the people.
Yeah, before this, sci-fi had all been bright, shiny Star Trek ships. I mean, you could see what sci-fi looked like with the Star Trek TV show. Everything was brand new. And that was a pretty radical idea, is that, this is like an old tank division type war movie. Everything's covered in mud and sand, and it's not a glorious or glamorous life.
We got to talk about Ben Burt as well as we move into now the post-production. the sound library is just insane. He got a special achievement Oscar because this is groundbreaking work that he does for the audio side of inventing Star Wars. Tell me what these effects were. A tense steel cable being struck.
That was the blasters.
That was the blaster.
Right?
Yeah.
So the blaster sound effect, you just hit, those taut cables.
Tension wires.
Yeah. The hum of idling interlock motors on aged movie projectors mixed with interference caused by a TV set on a shieldless microphone.
Like you do. That's the hum of the lightsaber,
That's
right?
true.
That's the
That is true.
vroom.
Wow, which is just crazy. And then, of course, sounds made by dogs, bears, lions, tigers, and walruses mixed together.
That's the mighty Chewbacca.
That is the mighty Chewbacca.
Right?
That is true.
Ben Burt, man, I mean, he made that all seem right. And pew pew pew, which is the meme of how those blasters sound or whatever. It represents so much to us, and it felt right. Every sound felt right. I think he was the right person, in the right place at the right time. And his father tells the story of what you're describing with the wires. Is just Bert used to take his recorder and go around and just, what does that do when I do that? And he always kind of had that sound in the back of his bag, so to speak, of that kind of sounds like a laser or something like that. And it all just kind of synced up, man. And I love that.
Yeah, I've heard so many stories of Ben Burt carrying his recorder everywhere that, like, there was somewhere he was on a construction site and the size of the gravel or whatever when the truck would go over it, and he just stopped the construction workers and he goes, can you just, and he put his microphone down, could you just back over these rocks again? Or something. I think it was something like that. And I think it became the Rolling Boulder and Raiders or something like that. But yeah, that's everywhere he went. Like, everything was a potential sound effect.
These Teamsters look at it. What?
Huh? What?
What do you want us to do, sound boy?
Just being one of the greatest movies ever made. Just do it real quick.
Oh, and the Darth Vader's breathing, like everything with. I mean, everybody did an impersonation of that, and you could live with Darth Vader with your action figure because of that breathing and that sound effect and that voice.
Well, that and Williams' music, I'm sure we'll get to, but it's like George will be the first to tell you these are silent movies. Dialogue just gets in the way.
Well, let's get to why we're here. Harrison Ford.
Han Solo. I'm captain of the Millennium Falcon.
Right, Harrison Ford gets cast in this, and note to aspiring actors, Ford is eventually considered for Han Solo because he's brought in because, as I mentioned, he's in the genius incest bubble, and he gets called in to be a reader for Lucas on Star Wars. He was reading with all these potential actors until they realize, you're the guy. You're the one.
Nobody
that
else
be doing this. And who else was in the mix with Kurt Russell, Christopher Walken, William Catt, and Adam, you mentioned that this was a dual casting session with Carrie.
Yeah.
So Catt didn't get Han Solo, but he got in Carrie. So
he got in Carrie.
Show up, kids. That's half the win right there.
Yes. Always say yes. Do you want to do this thing? Yes.
And I guess Ford is notorious for saying, you can type this shit, but you can't say it.
Yeah.
Referring to a lot of the space dialogue you'll find in Star Wars. Clearly, looking at the movies we've covered so far, this is new territory for him.
Well,
talk about blasters and shield.
And Mark Hamill tells the story of his audition as well, which is that it's this gobbledygook. It's, again, you can type this stuff, but you sure can't say it, George. But the cast members, if you ever see I'm sure you have, Ken, the old black and white videotape of all the original auditions, it is just hands down that he picked the right actors. They really do sell this gobbledygook,
Yeah, no, they do it, and the three of them, the chemistry, it really works. I did also wrote about in summer of '77, after this movie had come out and already kind of been a hit, a whirlwind of a success. Mike Douglas interviews Hamill, Ford, and Carrie Fisher together on a show, but he brings out Carrie first because they didn't know what to do with these other guys. They're like, well, we got Eddie and Debbie's daughter. We'll bring her out first, and which is great. I'm such a Carrie Fisher fan, but the three of them together, and they talked about we were cast almost as a team because the way it all worked, and then George and his casting directors and everyone, they're smart moves.
Giving this is the theme throughout the entire movie, but of course it's going to come down to the cast to do this more than the models even, is that giving reality, speaking these lines with complete seriousness and the assumption that these people have lived an entire life in a galaxy far, far away. That when he refers to, it's, Spice Mines of Kessel or whatever. These are just things that are known. It's so thick with all that stuff. And man, what a cast, huh?
Well, biggest box office movie of all time.
Absolutely.
Beats his buddy Steven Spielberg, who had the previous record with Jaws, only to have him come back 5 years later and beat him again with E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
What a competition between those two chums, huh?
Two pals. They apparently, wasn't it Lucas who watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind and said, this is going to be the biggest movie of all time. Star Wars is going to be the biggest movie of all time. Okay, well, what do you say I'll bet you the 2.5 percentage points on the movies that Close Encounters is going to be bigger. Spielberg still apparently collects to this day on Star Wars, based on their friendly little genius incest. And where's Lucas when it opens? Hawaii. He's sure it wasn't going to work. He's developing Raiders on an island with Steven Spielberg.
In the great book by Chris Taylor, How Star Wars Conquered the Universe, I think the first weekend, George starts making his first tweak to A New Hope or Star Wars. He re-records some audio. He was never happy with that from the beginning. All of it, and that's why the special editions, everything that came later on, like up to McClunky this past year or so ago. Like George is not done with those movies. They had to be yanked away or sold out from under him before so he could like. And even then, McClunky was his last gift to all of us. Of I'm not done tweaking. And
was that a Lucas
right
choice, McClunky?
Beginning. Yeah, it was George. Because and he had done it before the sale.
Huh.
It's been sitting there in the vaults waiting, and then Disney Plus was the first time the world saw McClunky.
There was no reason to do a Dolby mix of a movie. Like 6 theaters in America could play that, but Lucas realized someday it will be every theater. And so he did this, he did a mono mix for most of the theaters in America. And therefore, while he was doing the Dolby mix, he forgot the movie had opened. And so he's in Hollywood mixing this. He's not done with Star Wars yet, and yet it is in theaters. And that's the story where he was at the Hamburger Hamlet on Hollywood Boulevard, just grabbing lunch between his mixing sessions to make the Dolby mix. And there's a line gathering along the window as he's sitting there in the window eating. He's like, it says to Marsha, it's like, I wonder what this line's for. Let's check it out. And we get out and they follow the line all the way around the corner. And it's for Star Wars, of course, which they had forgotten had opened because they were still finishing a different version of it.
And it makes me miss Hamburger Hamlet, which was a good time.
And it's number 1 at the box office its first 3 weeks, and then The Deep comes out and goes away, and Star Wars comes back to the number 1 spot in its 7th through 22nd weeks.
Wow.
And it plays, some theaters, I guess, play it for, it's like 60 theaters in the country just played it for the whole year.
Wow.
Which you don't get anymore, which just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
No, movies don't stay out for a whole year anymore.
Then it's nominated for 10 Oscars. It won 6. Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Film Editing, Original Score, of course. Best Sound and Best Visual Effects, with Ben Burtt's special Oscar and another special Oscar to John Dykstra and his team for scientific and engineering. It did not win for Best Actor in a Supporting Role, the only acting nomination I think Star Wars has ever happened. But I wanted to ask you guys if there were to be another nomination for acting in the Star Wars universe now as broad as it is, who would you nominate? Is there anybody out there who's worthy of an Oscar nomination?
I'd say Hamill and Last Jedi, but I think Hamill in Empire Strikes Back is just tremendously underrated, considering he had to do most of that by himself with a Muppet, and Frank Oz is great and everything. I know everyone says Hamill Last Jedi. I do not think Hamill gets the full credit for Empire Strikes Back.
If you're going to give away an Oscar for 3 Lord of the Rings movies, I say you give 1 Oscar to Mark Hamill for all 3 of the original trilogy, because he is great in Empire. But if you take the overall arc of Tachi Station onto I'm a Jedi like my father before, I mean, that work is phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree with that, and but you mentioned it, Peter Jackson in the battle for the Oscars with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which 2 Towers might have been the one that should have won, right? Maybe, I don't know. I'm not an expert on Oscar races, but those films are never going to get their due because of the reputation that was probably pre-Star Wars. You would think Star Wars would have changed that. I get it's big, popcorny, but you said something earlier, Paul, about just making the great American film to now the blockbuster. And Star Wars and Jaws are part of the dawn of the blockbuster age, and therefore they're just naturally, no fault of their own, they undercut themselves in awards because no one seems to. that they don't know they're supposed to take it seriously. But it's going back to our conversation at the top, where we joke about us being old guys and old fans and everything. But we grew up with this. This is our art. So we don't need to grow up and put the toys away. These are our stories that moved us, and we all take it seriously. I just would love, and I'm not saying every Transformers movie deserves an Oscar, but I'm just saying these movies, these big movies, they do work for me. And some of the Marvel stuff, Black Panther getting some love, and some certain moments in some of the bigger MCU films. I think I want them to be more accepted as award-worthy films.
Because they're hard to make. These are not easy movies to make. It's certainly Star Wars comes out of nowhere. Nobody had conceived of anything like that, and that from production design to special effects to the score to everything, it brought so much together, which is what films do. This is what we love about movies. They are this collaborative art. They are this formation of all these things, and look at all the factors that were brought together to make this one movie. That became a giant success. Well, what are we supposed to hate it now that it became a giant success?
But that's the thing. We did take it seriously because we were supposed to. That's what George wanted. This remember those myths and fables we grew up with? This is for you now. So we talk about Oscars and those. They're never going to look at those movies. They have this weird, old, antiquated view of it in my mind. They are from like the 60s going, kids films. Let's go do this.
Right. These are not serious films.
Yeah, they're not serious films.
Yeah.
And they're fun. They're whiz-bang, but they're important. They're important films.
Well, I got 2 big points to make about that. First of all, I always loved the 70s into the early 80s because it seemed like the best films being made were also aligned with the most popular. Like you mentioned Transformers, never in a million years would those be nominated for major Oscars.
Right.
It's won some tech stuff because of how complicated those are to make. But back in the day, the big box office winners, Godfather, Rocky, Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars, The Sting, and so those won the box office. Your award winners, Godfather, Rocky, Star Wars, Empire, The Sting. Those lines crossed a lot more back then than they used to today. I don't know where the disconnect came because maybe the blockbusters aren't as good. But the second thing I'll say is, and it goes right up to this Oscars that we just had. Back in 2008, The Dark Knight got snubbed, and I think the Academy went, we should have nominated that for Best Picture. It's like the biggest movie on the planet. We got 5 movies no one really cares about nominated for Best Picture. Next year, we're going to make 10 nominations available for Best Picture. And they do. And movies like District 9 get an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. So it's like, okay, we're folding in the popular movies. Turns out they can have up to 10. So this year, they had 8. And I look at the 2 remaining slots and go, come on, you got a bunch of... This is a year when no one saw a lot of stuff. Slip a Soul in there. Put The Invisible Man in there. Something. I mean, those are both excellent movies. The Invisible Man just turned that genre on its ear. I thought it was brilliant. With a great lead performance. So, like, here's a movie you could make a lot of hubbub for. And a ton of people saw it right before the pandemic and during. So, there's room for 10 nominees. I say you take them up on all 10 and throw some popular movies in there that exceed in their genre, and I think exceeding in your genre deserves an award. You don't have to necessarily make a drama to win.
I agree that exceeding your genre is a great way to say it, because again, I'm not suggesting every big blockbuster, because it changed. You mentioned like Rocky, go to Rocky to Rocky 4. Look at the difference, and that's kind of the industry change. The industry started becoming that, and the dividing lines, and it might have been the old industry, the old timers being like, these popcorn films are going to, are messing up our art. And there probably some truth to that during that era. But
we love all these 70s filmmakers, and they're all taking the genres that they loved as kids that were now trash genres, that were now, biker movies, Easy Rider. The biker movies were trash, but they made Easy Rider. Monster movies were trash, but Spielberg made Jaws. Mob movies were total like rat-a-tat-tat, you dirty rat, but not when it gets into Coppola's hands, and then here comes Lucas with sci-fi. Whip some respectability, or at least seriousness. Taking them seriously, that Lucas never wrote off the sci-fi movies. Yeah, we can see the spaceships on the strings, but what if you couldn't?
The most successful film merchandising ever, of course, valued at approximately $30 billion, and that was 9 years ago. So that stat came out, and Lucas took a $500,000 cut from his paycheck to take full ownership of the franchise merchandising rights and the ability to make a sequel. So he's did the right thing there.
That is one of the best facts. That he gave up a bunch of money so that he could keep action figure rights. Who's going to want that, George? Yeah. And sequel rights. Why don't you make this one first, George? But that's how far ahead he was seeing.
Doubled down on his vision. That's just like, that's such a big balls move. special edition comes out and grosses $138 million, making it the highest grossing reissue of all time. And who gives it a negative review? Pauline Kael. And that's our show. But of course she does, right? Yeah.
But we are on the Ford Fiesta podcast here. Let's talk some Han Solo moments, okay? Because I've always said Star Wars, it's already the best movie you've ever seen, and then Han Solo enters.
Well, going back to your book again, of the moments that make up the greatest movie of all time, for me, you mentioned it briefly, Solo returning at the end. That's my favorite. I mean, I'm 7, yeah. I'm going, what? Because he's my favorite guy, and he's like, he left. All right, well, go, Luke, go get him. And then he shows up. I'm like, he's the man. He's become my favorite character in anything ever. So that's my favorate moment. Yeah,
and in that piece I wrote in the book, I referenced that the guy who uploaded that actual recording from a 77 theater to YouTube, where it's the audio of the audience reacting.
Oh, I want to hear that.
Yeah, look it up. Wow. It's awesome, and it's what you expect. It's people cheering, but just to see it, just see how it hit, and it's the whole thing, it's a whole sequence, and the blowing up the Death Star. But when Han returns, man, it's easy to say it's all a trope now, and now the audience would be like, oh, I knew he was going to come back. You didn't necessarily know that back then, but also when you're young, you don't know. It makes sense, and that's one of the things Harrison Ford brought so much to that role and did so well. But it was just like, and it's such a moment of victory for Harrison Ford and that character. And I always say it's just that is Han, the core of Han. He Leia says it. Star Wars is about choice. It's about destiny bringing you to choice, and no one's going to make it for him. He's got to make it for himself. And I bet Chewie was in his ear the whole time, going, remember, you left Infant's Nest on Severine. Remember you do this all the time, and you're going to leave him to die. We can't do that. Or Chewie just sat there silently, and Han goes, you're right. We got to go back. Because he knows what's right. It's always in him. He's not a bad guy. He's just that rogue scoundrel. He wants to be something in spite of himself.
And when Han Solo finally shows up, and as a kid, this is definitely my favorite character, and to this day, this character rocks. I'm already in it for the Luke Skywalker. I'm already in it for Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm loving Jawas. I'm loving R2 and 3PO. And then Han Solo enters. But I love that in a classic Star Wars move, he enters with a sidekick, this giant furry thing, and their relationship's never explained, and that's just who they are. They're friends. Why would he have to explain, and I owe a life debt to this guy? No.
Oh,
I'm just with an 8-foot-tall Wookiee.
The overwriting that would happen today, of course, I think it's a plague in Hollywood today. It's this let's talk too much about what's going on. We get it. You're friends.
Yeah.
Get to the real part of the stuff we need to talk about, which is
friends with the dog.
Negotiating the ship and doing the things in the plot.
Because then someone will make a YouTube video of 10 plot holes in the movie. We don't know how they're friends. How did they meet? Plot hole. And it's just,
you're
ridiculous.
Right. God, it's terrible.
But so Han Solo comes with Chewbacca and the Millennium Falcon. I mean, this is just like this universe stuff. It's just so thick. It's so wonderful.
Yeah, and the Falcon is a character in and of itself, as we know, but it just makes sense. And just the fact that the running joke is you came in that thing, and all those things. But Han believes it, and Han believes in this life that he wants, and that's kind of it. Everyone sees something. But Harrison plays what Han believes is there, in spite of sometimes the facts, because he knows what's inside. He knows the heart. He knows the core. Yeah, this doesn't look like much, but it's got to where it counts. So do I. And that's the energy that Harrison was able to bring. The senior member of that trio, early 30s when he made the film. Perfect casting as Harrison Ford.
And a couple other good moments, Han Solo moments. I ain't going anywhere until Luke says she's rich. And then he decides to go on to the Death Star mission because he's like, I'm out. I got you here. I'm out. That's such a key Han Solo moment.
He's always running away. Harrison Ford as Han Solo, is my favorite Star Wars character. Indiana Jones is my favorite cinematic character, for whatever that's worth for this conversation. But for Han Solo's my guy. I'm a Han Solo guy, and a lot of people in my generation, you're Luke or Han or whatever the choices were for you. But it's a battle in himself. It is about our choices. And I've grown and matured with the character. I love in Force Awakens that we meet Han again, and he has once again run away from a problem, even though he knows he shouldn't. And that's all his head. What does he do? They blow up like a lot of people think. He does not join the rebellion at the end of New Hope. He gets that medal. That's great. Chewie doesn't get one until later. But, Han he's not part of the rebellion until Return of the Jedi. when he is General Solo, that's why Leia looks to him and is like, "You've committed to something. Now I can truly commit to you. I can't allow myself to love because I've got the bigger things on my shoulders. That's part of Leia's journey. But the first thing, they blow up the Death Star, and the first thing we see, in 1980, Han's ready to run away again. He doesn't want any part of this. He's out of here. He's Captain Solo of the Millennium Falcon, not of the Rebellion. And Harrison plays that all the way through, and he plays it all the way up to Force Awakens, too.
Key Han Solo moment, my favorite moment is, and you just don't see it coming, is they're on the Death Star. She says, "You came in that thing? You're braver than I thought." And I love his response there is always, "Nice."
Nice.
But then they turn the corner to the stormtroopers, and Han chases them. Screaming. That has always thrilled me and made me laugh so hard. And if you want a symbol of Han Solo, chasing the problem into a dead alley in a dead corner where there's nowhere left to run, and then he has to retreat.
It's another Han trait. Run there. What does he do at Empire? The door opens, it's Vader, boom, doesn't think, he shoots. Return of the Jedi. There's those scouts down there. We're going to go get him. Hey, it's me. Force Awakens. How are we going to land on Starkiller Base? We'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. We're going to come out of hyperspace pretty much on the planet. We'll crash land. Don't worry about it. It's Han.
Yeah, they really keep the character remarkably consistent throughout the sequel trilogy, certainly in Force Awakens. Yeah, it's really nice to see classic Han try to talk his way out of something in over his head and then figures the way out.
And we'll talk about Force Awakens November, maybe?
In a while.
So let's take a look at the Ford definitive list of essentials. Things we think Harrison Ford is best known for, and then does he do them? Righteous anger. He doesn't really do that here. That's more of a Jack Ryan thing. Does he point? The pointing is a big deal.
Ooh.
You find this Jabba.
I'm trying to think, because I think in Empire he does a lot of pointing.
He certainly
right?
does in the hallway with...
When he says, "I'm in it for the money," he points at himself. He goes, look, princess. Doesn't he point at her there? He goes, "Look, princess."
Look, your worshipfulness, let's get one thing straight. I take orders from just one person, me.
He does,
right.
yeah.
There's a point. Maybe that might be the birth of the point, because I don't think we've seen many of them up till now.
I don't think he's pointed yet.
He's got to turn that point outward, but yes, the point's there. He's working.
Smile and charm, absolutely. Shout or growl, of course, he yells at the stormtroopers while he's running after him. And does he hit a guy? Now, this will take us to the Harrison Ford punch count, which so far, after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 movies, is still holding steady at 1.
1.
7 movies, he's only punched a guy once.
I don't think he punches anyone, maybe to the Endor, the biker scout, right? He's flinging around, hitting him with a log or something like that. I don't recall.
Yeah.
More of an indie thing, I guess, than a Han thing.
Yeah. He tries to take a punch at Lando in Empire, but fails. So that is a punch. We'll get to that one. But I think in Star Wars proper, no punches, which means the only person he's punched, even going through Star Wars, is Jack Lemmon in the movie Love.
Yeah, back in 1967 or whatever.
Did you know that, Ken? We're here to inform you any Harrison Ford stuff you need to know.
When you pitched me this podcast, I did. This is what I envisioned. And I'm glad to be here.
These are the facts you want coming out of this nonsense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yes.
Well, also, I want to say, Paul, you've been through this journey so far, from Dead Heat and a merry-go-round through this. The Harrison Ford coming out of the conversation into Star Wars, did you think of anything different now that you've seen Harrison Ford from The Conversation, American Graffiti, Getting Straight, Journey to Shiloh, Time for Killing, and Dead Heat on a Merry-Go-Round and Love?
Well, I can tell you, Lucas mined untapped potential in Harrison Ford. I mean, none of this was on display. Maybe a little in Bob Falfa, but he's still super restrained. He's refined to the car, so he's got lines where he intimidates and where he sings Some Enchanted Evening, which is probably my favorite scene in that movie. But nothing quite like what's on display with Han Solo. Just to know that's there and trust it after not seeing it in its full glory in all the movies up till now. Kudos to Lucas for taking that risk, because he unleashed an icon.
Yeah, this is the real first Harrison Ford movie. We've watched a lot of movies with Harrison Ford in them, but this is the first Harrison Ford movie I think we've covered on the Ford Fiesta.
That's true. We forgot to mention how Harrison Ford is he in this.
How Harrison Ford is he?
It's like a 100% or 95 or 100. It's the establishing shot of a Harrison Ford movie.
The way he slides into into the booth in the cantina, the way he slides in, here's a movie star here.
Yeah, no, I think in the 90s is right. I think by Empire and Raiders, it's Harrison Ford. Like it's that template that's going to make a lot of money and a lot of and influence a lot of people. But you're right. He's getting this is his first one for his first time out of the gate as himself, maybe.
And his first line is Han Solo.
Han Solo. I'm Captain of the Millennium Falcon.
I love that. Han Solo, Captain of the Millennium Falcon. You haven't heard of the Millennium Falcon?
Should I have?
It's the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parts.
Any final thoughts, or we should get to your plugs, Ken?
Thank you for having me on this one. Being such a Star Wars fan like we are, and just it's been a part of our lives for decades and decades and decades in some cases. But I just love going back to the beginning and to see where it went, where it expanded from, and what George had in his mind, and how he just was like, "Don't worry, you'll see, you all will eventually see."
All right, well, check Ken out at the Good People Association.
Yeah.
.fun?
Yeah,
what
please. Yeah, thegpa.fun. You can go to my website. Yeah, my website is kennapzok.com. From there, if you want to pick up my book, Why We Love Star Wars, it is you can link from there. I have a couple left if you want to get autographed signed copies or personalized copies from me. Whichever term sounds less ego-driven. So I think personalized signed copy. And then hopefully I'll restock on those too. So yeah, thanks for having me, boys. I always love what you all do, and you just celebrate movies in just a specific fun way I enjoy.
We link up to that. It's been nice having conversations with you, not recorded, about these sort of things. And I had said for years, like, I stopped talking Star Wars with people because they were just, I mean, I'll go ahead and use the term, they're beneath me. I mean, it's just like, why would I talk Star Wars with you? You don't know what the hell you're talking about. But I meet someone like Ken, and we hole up in the corner of the bar on the Sunset there, and I'm like, I'm enjoying talking Star Wars with someone.
It's great. Plus, the three of us can enjoy a good reference to Buddy Biancalana.
Oh, there's an outline. That wraps Star Wars. So much to say about that one. And if you have anything to say about this legendary film yourself, chime in at The Movie Guys pretty much everywhere on social media. And, of course, at themovieguys.net.
Next week, shot before Star Wars, but released after, Harrison Ford returns to a tiny part with a few lines for the last time in Apocalypse Now.
So, even in the special editions, Apocalypse Now shot first.